Hello, it's Amy, and I'm here with a chapter from A Bookman's Letters by Robertson Nicoll. And today we are looking at a chapter titled The Pleasures and Advantages of Rereading. And so once again, this is a collection of essays from 1931. There are many who love to read. There are comparatively few who love to reread. This is one of the reasons why old books are in jeopardy as they stand upon the library shelves. They are viewed with murderous eyes, and unless they can get themselves reprinted in new and attractive guise, they are likely to be summarily disposed of. But there is a great deal to say for rereading, and much pleasure and advantage is to be gained in the process. The rereader is very often a person who has a passion for books, and who is greatly restricted in his choice of books. This may seem an unfortunate condition, but it is not. Happy is the child born amid a small collection of really valuable volumes. He is likely to learn without teaching the pleasures of reading and the pleasures of rereading. There are not a few who begin early to devour books, and who learn to prefer reading to all other occupations. Of these was James Payn. He tells us that he was an omnivorous reader as a boy, with a marked distaste for study and sport. His father kept the Berkshire Harriers, and the boy had to go hunting twice a week. This he abhorred, though he had a nice little bay pony and could ride well enough. The proceedings were too protracted for his taste, and he wanted to be at home to finish the mysteries of Udolpho by the fire. He disliked fox hunting even more than hare hunting, but all his family had sporting proclivities, and he had to go through with it. Sometimes the waiting about and having nothing to read grew absolutely intolerable. There was then nothing for it but to dismount, put clover or something in his hair, smear his shoulder with mold, and ride home, having met with a rather nasty tumble. It would have been better and cheaper to have let him enjoy Captain Cook's voyages and the Arabian Nights all day, without the temptations of practicing duplicity. When Payn went afterwards to Woolwich Military Academy, his bitter complaint was that there was no time for reading and writing. There are those to whom the having nothing to read is an intense grievance. They instinctively look round for a book wherever they go, and they are often bitterly disappointed. It is a predicament indeed to be landed on a visit where the house is destitute of books, and there no library is near. I have heard of a reader so insatiable that he tried to get squints into odd volumes even during the penitential process of morning calls. This is a length to which few would go, but I am with the same writer when he says that he would rather read a list of hotels or a week-old advertisement sheet than do without reading at all. Supposing that the craving is developed early, and that there are few books to gratify it, the natural result is that these books are read very frequently. Boys will not read theology and philosophy and history, except under extreme pressure, and it is only a few among them who really care for poetry. It is light reading, or rather fiction, which the boy considers really and genuinely fitting for the intelligent mind. Well, if the fiction is sound, it is not a hard fate to go over the Waverley novels again and again, not hard to read Bulwer Lytton from Pelham and Eugene Aram right on to Kenelm Chillingly, still less hard to read all that can be reached of Charles Dickens. It is where the taste for reading is not strong, and the opportunities for gratifying such taste as exists are abundant, that those desirous of keeping up with the times and joining intelligently in conversation never acquire the practice of rereading. Though they might not confess it, they are quite aware of their own deficiencies, and know that the most they can accomplish is to read such of the new books as are most generally talked of. Be it far from me to condemn the excellent habit of reading new books. The saying, when a new book comes out, I read an old one, is sufficiently foolish. A certain rigidity, a certain blindness and hardness of mind are apt to settle on those who in no way keep up with the times. Their minds are fossilized. They fall out of a living language. They lose touch with the progress of thought. They miss the meaning of events. There is no reason why anyone should become a mere antiquarian or a pure pedant, but there are many reasons why the practice of rereading should be kept up. The first advantage of rereading is that it gives one the true possession of a book. Most memories are exceedingly treacherous. Even when the memory is strong in certain directions, it is apt to be weak in others. A powerful verbal memory, the memory by which a man recollects a list of names or learns to repeat a string of verses, is not usually associated with the most serviceable memory of all, the memory which makes a man aware of his own knowledge, or at least the sources from which he can at any time draw inspiration. Professor Flinders Petrie once contended that we are drunken with writing. The fetters of writing, he said, hold us back from the living touch with nature. Distrust in writing has plainly deadened the memory of the senses. The flagging thought has by the bounds of writing lost all life and become a mere carcass, senseless and corrupt. When art was most vigorous and original, when neither artists nor patrons could read, and the ornaments and luxuries of life were then more completely finished, the finest skill, the finest taste, the keenest insight were reached without the use of recorded words. To this it was replied at the time that country actors who changed their parts so often and bank clerks in London had as good memories as any Egyptian or Brahmin. This may be so, but I fancy that the habit of recording by letters diminishes the strength of the human memory. And this is why I am not so sure as to the advantages of copious note-taking. There is much to be said for the practice. It seems as if it ought to impress what one has read upon the mind, and it seems also to provide for us a store of gathered thoughts to which we can recur. But it is so sure that the copying out of passages, does it fix it in the memory? And is it so certain that the passages we select on a particular occasion will continue to interest us? And may it not be that the notebooks supersede the living mind? A man may find himself tongue-tied in conversation for want of a certain fact, but keenly conscious of all the while that this fact is recorded and indexed in one of his notebooks at home. However this may be, we want to get as much of the best we read firmly lodged in our minds, and there is nothing that will help us so much as the practice of rereading. Though our powers of memory be very limited, a patient and loving and repeated perusal of a great book will at least win for us something well worth its price. There is still another advantage. Many of the best books will not yield their secret at a first reading. They demand to be very slowly and carefully and frequently perused. At a dinner party the other evening, we had a discussion about difficult books. I ventured to say that Darwin's Origin of Species is one of the most difficult books in the English language. Nobody was more qualified than Huxley to understand it, and Huxley expounded it to the English public. But so late as 1888, Huxley writes, I have been reading the Origin slowly again for the nth time, with the view of picking out the essentials of the argument for the obituary notice. Nothing entertains me more than to hear people call it easy reading. Another very difficult writer is Bishop Butler. The reason is that every sentence is a link in an argument, closely welded as with links of iron. If you miss or misunderstand one sentence, you speedily lose the meaning. Browning is undeniably difficult in many parts, and chiefly perhaps in his earliest and latest books. Whether his obscurity is to be counted sin to him or not, I do not need to discuss. But I question whether some of his later work has as yet found a true interpreter, especially Fiefin at the Fair with its accompaniments. But the mastering of a great writer enriches, fructifies, and expands the mind more than any other discipline. The pleasures of rereading, once tested, cannot willingly be relinquished. A very good essayist compares rereading to a journey through a beautiful and well-known piece of scenery. When we read a book for the first time, we are like explorers, seeking the charm and excitement of discovery, rushing on with a kind of passion, desiring to mount the hill in front and to see the new landscape spread out at our feet. A hardened explorer is always seeking for fresh woods and pastures new, but to reread is to choose ways known and loved before and enjoy their beauty afresh. A man goes to the same place autumn by autumn. He takes the same walks, the same drives. In a manner, he has seen everything, and he is very glad to see it again. The memory is refreshed by the vision he loves, and the heart is refreshed with it. It is so with rereading. We know the book, but we discover that we do not know it, and that it is fresh. It has fresh felicities and delights that disclose themselves at each perusal. Besides, though the book does not change while it awaits us on the shelf, we keep changing. We bring more experience, more knowledge, more power of appreciation. I am talking, of course, about the great books. Suppose a man visits the Alps for the first time and is ignorant of botany. He goes back another time, and during the interval he has learned to botanize. That will make a great difference. To compare Dr. Hort's letters on his Alpine journey with those of the ordinary travel is instructive. So it is with books. The pages are held to the fire of experience, and the living letters disclose themselves. When we know, not merely by reading or by imagining, what a great phase of life may mean, either in joy or in sorrow, we discover new messages and new meanings in familiar pages. Even a small experience adds to the significance of our reading. The other morning I had read some melancholy news about a coal strike. I happened immediately after to take up Sydney Smith's Rules for a Happy Life and came on this. Keep up blazing fires. Turning over several books for the day, I came upon references to coal and fires. These would never have been noticed, save for the circumstances of the day. Once I remember getting some teeth extracted, and after it, every book I read seemed to have references to teeth, white teeth, gleaming teeth, strong teeth, bad teeth. I admit that there are books which we do not reread with pleasure because we know them too well. They cannot be many, but there are some. I know Pickwick so well that at the end of a page without turning, I could almost continue the narrative. When that is so, it is well to give the book a rest. But, as has been well said, to remember a story is merely to remember the way, to know the walk. You can tell the main turns of the road and of the story, but the intervals between the turns are very pleasant, and all the more pleasant because you are more or less familiar. How do authors feel when they reread their old books? How do politicians feel when they reread their old speeches? Wordsworth is said to have possessed about 200 books, and it is well known that towards the end of his life he read nothing but his own poetry. He thought he did this because he wanted to improve it, and so far as it could be improved. But who can doubt that he was really happy in his own company? There is a curious passage in Boswell which bears upon this. Boswell and Johnson started on June 2nd, 1781, to pay a visit to South Hill in Bedfordshire. At the hospitable mansion of Squire Dilly, Boswell says, he talked little to us in the carriage, being chiefly occupied in reading Dr. Watson's second volumes of chemical essays, which he liked very well, and his own Prince of Abyssinia, on which he seemed to be intensely fixed, having told us that he had not looked at it since it was first published. I happened to take it out of my pocket this day, and he seized upon it with avidity. He pointed out to me the following remarkable passage. By what means, said the prince, are the Europeans thus powerful? Or why, since they can so easily visit Asia and Africa for trade or conquest, cannot the Asiatics and Africans invade their coasts, plant colonies in their ports, and give laws to their natural princes? The same wind that carries them back would bring us thither. They are more powerful, sir, than we, answered Imlac. Because they are wiser, knowledge will always predominate over ignorance as man governs the other animals. But why their knowledge is more than ours, I know not what reason can be given. But the unsearchable will of the Supreme Being, he said. This, sir, no man can explain otherwise. Apropos of this, there is an obscure passage in Boswell on the different meaning between two words commonly used as equivalents. Dr. Johnson said, to remember and to recollect are different things. A man has not the power to recollect what is not in his mind, but when a thing is in his mind, he may remember it. Dr. Hill says the first of the definitions given by Johnson of to remember is to bear in mind anything, not to forget. To recollect, he defines to recover to memory. Dr. Hill also quotes from Horace Walpole, who distinguishes between the two words on his revisiting his old school Eton. By the way, the clock strikes the old cracked sound. I recollect so much and remember so little. In my dictionary, to remember is defined to recollect, and to recollect is defined as to remember. But is there not a distinction? I remember Pickwick. All is present to me as I read, but I recollect Esmond. That is, when I pass from one page to another, I can seldom tell exactly what is coming. But when I read the second page, I recollect that I have read it before. And that is the end of the chapter here on the advantages of rereading.